So, hello everybody and welcome. Yes, welcome back here at BSN Network. Here back here, BSN Network. This is BSN Network podcast here today. It is Wednesday, December 22nd. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far and a good rest of their day yesterday. It is, in fact, Wednesday, December 22nd here today. Hopefully everybody's having a day so far. Coming off of another big night last night in sports, a big night in the NFL. We had 2 games on last night, 2 games on Monday night. I apologize for not doing a pod yesterday. Had some other stuff going on, so was not able to get a pod in yesterday. But I am back at it today with another podcast for you guys. And last night was a big night in sports, big night in football. Specifically, you obviously had the Washington and Philadelphia, and you had the Rams versus Seahawks. Obviously, Rams won and the Eagles won, so Eagles staying alive. Rams just continue to add on to their win total as they get closer and closer to the playoffs, which is what down the stretch here in these final 3 games and into the playoffs is going to be a very fun, tight NFC race. In terms of just playoff seeding, which teams are in, which teams aren't. The AFC West is tight. I mean, you really look at it, or the AFC West rather, I apologize. NFC West is really tight. You look at the Rams. The Rams are up there. Cardinals. The Niners are on the outside of that NFC West, but even them, the Niners, they are, right in the heart of it now with a couple big wins by them. So, you really start to look at it, and now you're really starting to see, the playoff really, build itself out, and the playoff really starting to, form and see, which teams are going to be in, which teams are out, which teams are on the outside, which teams are, right now in the playoffs very well could change within the next week or, 2 or what, could it come down to the final week of the season? It's going to be very fun, especially in the NFC. The AFC is fun. The NFC is crazy because there's a chance 2 teams that are in now could be out of it. AFC is more stable. The NFC, there's more of a chance of a team that nobody expected being in making it. AFC, there's a chance of maybe a team that some people expected making it, and maybe a team that people expected to make it not making it. One of those situations in the AFC. But either way, playoff race is really tight. I went 4-0 on my game picks over the past 2 days. I promise I did not cheat or whatever you want to call it, where I changed my pick. I don't lie about my picks. I tell it like it is. If I get it right, I get it right. If I get it wrong, I get it wrong. So I did get both Monday night picks correct. You heard me say I thought the Raiders were going to win, and I predicted the Vikings. And last night I predicted the Eagles and the Rams. Now I do have proof. I mean I put it down into an app. It asks you which teams you want to pick, and you pick it, and it tells you you're right or wrong, which is how I get all my records and stuff. So I do have proof of all that, but I'm not going to get into that stuff. I went 4-0 over the past 2 days, so that's good. Upped my overall record. I recounted. I actually messed up. The last time I counted, I went 12-4 this week. So when I was back before, I was at 5 wins or 5 losses, and then I finished 10-5. So I knew there's something wrong that I did, and because there's 16 games were played on over the week, and I went 10-5. So I knew something had to be wrong. I knew I was missing something. So I recounted, and it ended up being 12-4. So I missed a win, and I added a loss in there, so something, I don't know what it was when I was counting or whatever, so I actually went 12-4 this week, moving my overall record to 140-83, and that's heading into week 16. So obviously last season, my record to end the year was 189-90. Right now, 140-83. So I'm probably not going to reach the 190 mark this year. A possibility. I need 50 wins over the final 3 weeks of the regular season and along with into the playoffs and stuff. But we'll see how everything plays out. As for sports on tonight, there's not a crazy amount on, given the fact that a lot of NBA games have been getting postponed. NHL's obviously, they decided to cancel all their operations and all their practices and game stuff until after the winter, after the Christmas break and all that. And the same has been said for the NBA. They're going to still play, but in terms of the NBA, there's been some postponements. Nets, obviously my favorite team, are off tonight. They got postponed again. And your hope is, as a Net fan, as a basketball fan, which was going to be a very fun game Christmas night, we were hoping to see the Nets-Lakers on Christmas. That was going to be the nightcap of the big day of Christmas basketball. As of right now, that game's up in the air. Nets were supposed to head on to West Coast trip. Their first game got postponed against the Trailblazers, so we don't really know what's going to happen. That's the game still up in the air against the Lakers. You got to hope by 2 days from now, right? Today's Wednesday, tomorrow's Thursday, Christmas Eve's Friday, then, obviously Saturday will be Christmas. So you got to hope by 3 days from now, you got to hope the whole COVID situation with the Nets and around the NBA is better so we can have a packed day of basketball. We also have 2 football games on Christmas Day. You also got to hope those 2 hold up as well. With all that being said, got a lot to get to today on the podcast. Let's get to the topics for today's podcast. I know it's been a couple days since this hiring was made. Obviously, Monday I came down, talked a lot about the NFL, the weekend in the NFL. Tuesday, yesterday, was not able to do a pod. Today I'm back at it, so I said I wanted to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it. The Mets yesterday made it official. They had his interview and everything like that. Buck Showalter has agreed to a 3-year contract, and he has become the new Mets manager as the Mets find their new guy, and that is Buck Showalter, a 3-year deal for him. I'm going to get into it, talk about it, give you my thoughts on it. You know the drill. I do this all the time. A player, a coach, whatever big move is made. But the Mets have found their guy. They have found their new guy, and you got to hope as a Met fan that he is the guy because the Mets have gotten it wrong. Terry Collins had a little bit of a run there, and since that, it's been 2 bad managers. It's been Mickey Callaway, who did nothing, and it's been Luis Rojas, who I guess you could say had moments of where the team was playing hard and winning and moments where the team looked flat and terrible, and we saw that majority of last season, where we saw moments of them being in first place and being a true team. They were dealing with a lot of injuries. They were still winning. And then there was moments like late in the year where they just stunk and they looked lost. And it just looked like Luis Rojas lost the team. So they hired Showalter. I'll get into it, talk about it, give you all you need to know. Another topic is Daniel Jones is done for the season. So it has been officially confirmed. Daniel Jones is done for the year as he continues to battle the neck injury. And, just from a football fan, obviously I'm not a Giants fan, obviously I'm Jets fan. Just from a football standpoint, whether you're a fan of the team or you don't, whether you like the team or you don't like the team, whether you like the player or you don't like the player, an injury like a neck or a head or something like that's always a scary thing. So before you even talk about this and that about him, it's always a scary thing. So you got to hope that this isn't anything career altering for him. It was only his 3rd year. You got to hope that this isn't something that's going to affect him for the rest of his career, that he will be able to recover and get back to playing on the field again, because obviously it is severe enough to keep him out the rest of this year, and maybe part of that's because they don't want to injure it further given the fact that they're done. They're not officially eliminated, but we all know the Giants aren't making the playoffs. Maybe it's because it is that severe. Whatever it is, he is out. You got to hope it's nothing that severe, that he will be back wherever he plays, which I'll get more into detail when we get there. And then we'll get to the New York sports update as well. Like I said, not a whole lot on tonight in terms of New York sports. Knicks were on last night. Nets postponed. Rangers are obviously given the NHL's on Christmas break and decided to postpone all the operations and all practices and stuff until after Christmas break, which is going to be, I believe, the next Rangers game is December 27th. So it's a good week, for them. So that's what's going to be interesting. It's kind of a pause in the season. It's like this is like an all-star break. So how do teams react? Do teams maybe take this as a positive and reset and maybe come out of this little break firing? Do teams take this as a negative and just come back and aren't where they were? We'll see. You got to hope that it affects the Rangers in a positive way because we've been off to a great start this year, and you just got to hope that this is something that doesn't affect the Rangers too much moving forward. Alrighty, but with all that being said, a lot to get to today on the podcast. with all that being said, this is BSN Podcast, and let's get right into it. Alrighty, so Buck Showalter agrees to 3-year contract as Mets manager, replaces Luis Rojas. So yes, you have heard that right. Most recently Baltimore Orioles manager Buck Showalter is heading to the New York Mets. As we all know, this deal was made on December 18th, which, what was that, Saturday or something like that? I don't know. I lose track of days. But obviously it happened over the weekend. Like I mentioned earlier, Monday, I always talk about the end. Monday, Fridays are all my NFL stuff. And then Tuesdays usually is like the recap of all the Monday games in fantasy. Wednesdays usually whatever. Thursdays the Thursday game and some other stuff. And then Fridays always just the football Friday, gets you ready for the weekend and all that stuff. So I'm finally getting into it now. But yesterday did have their introductory press conference for Buck Showalter. It was held all virtual. But I could just tell you this from my own feeling. A lot of Mets fans are happy from what they saw just out of Buck Showalter's press conference. And we all know how it is, right? A lot of, I can say that with a lot of my coaches over the years. I can tell you this right now, Salah's press conference blew me away. Like, when I listened to him talk that day, I mean, maybe it was just because we saw how bad Gazes was with his eyeballs and just going all over the place. Salah's press conference was a breath of fresh air when he was when he had his, and I know that feeling of what Mets fans are feeling right now. It's that sense of, wow, we finally got the right guy, and wow, we think this is it. And the way he was speaking, the way in terms of just what he wants to do with this team, in terms of what he plans on doing with this team, is really promising if you're a Mets fan. And I mean, this is I feel like the Mets are in a similar situation as what the Jets were in most recently, right? The Mets have failed the past 2 times hiring a manager, right? You had Terry Collins, who got you to the World Series. You got there with the Royals. You ended up losing. You got to a couple wild cards, got to the playoffs. He was fine. He was pretty solid. Was he great? Was he amazing? Did he win you everything? No. But did he keep the team in line? Did he develop players? Did he draw in some solid names? Yeah. The Mets were a very good baseball team that were making, playoff appearances, got to the World Series. You could play the what if game. What if Matt Harvey never came out in the 9th inning, obviously, in that World Series? You could play all that what if. But the fact is, they got there. They did not win, but they got there, and they haven't been back since. And part of the reason that has been is, number one, just a general lack of talent in the roster. I mean, the Mets haven't had that great of a roster the past couple seasons. I mean, I understand they went out last season and got Francisco Lindor, but we got to realize baseball is not basketball. Basketball is a sport where you can have one great player, and that's all you need. Baseball, you need 9 solid guys to go out there and produce both offensively and defensively. Same thing with same thing with football, same thing with, I could say hockey's the same thing. I think hockey's, it's the truth. I mean, maybe hockey you could say, oh, if you have one great player. I mean, you could use the Oilers as an example, right? Connor McDavid, a really good player, but has the Oilers had much success over the past couple seasons? Other than recently, they were one of the worst teams in the league, even when he was there, because you need a lot of guys. But back to the point with the Mets. The Mets have not had a great, they've had a lot of lack of talent. Like, ever since Terry Collins left, they had a lack of talent. They haven't been the same team since. You brung in Mickey Callaway. He was awful. Team was just terrible, not playing for him. He lost the locker room. Just bad. He's just one of those guys that was just not built for a head coach in a big market, big city, New York, baseball, right? Big time sport. He just was not built for the bright lights. You then bring in hold on a second. You then bring in Carlos Beltran. The whole Houston Astros sign-stealing scandal went on. Beltran didn't even coach one single game with them. I don't even think Beltran got to spring training. That was a whole crazy event, and you got rid of Beltran. Then you brought in Luis Rojas, and I feel like the Luis Rojas hiring was one of those things that it was like a panic. It was late. It was close to spring training. It was something that needed to be done quick, something that, you couldn't spend all day figuring out who you were going to sign. So they brought in somebody that was within the organization. They brought him in. And not that he was awful, but he wasn't, kind of like Callaway, he wasn't built for the lights. He wasn't really he was kind of soft for a team that kind of needed a, kick in the butt, if you will. He was kind of a soft manager, not a guy that would go on there and be all fiery, and, if the team wasn't hitting, he would go on there and, say it. Like, a lot of coaches don't do that. Luis Rojas was kind of that guy. And now the Mets hire Buck Showalter. And this is something like, as a Met fan, if you are a Met fan right now, you got to be feeling good. But not just because of the fact that you hired Buck Showalter. It's a veteran manager. And it's really the first time in a long time that the Mets have really brung in a guy that genuinely knows what he's doing in terms of handling a locker room, getting the most out of his players. And one of the biggest things with the New York Mets that has been an issue for the past couple seasons under Callaway and then Rojas most recently is in-game decision-making. Rojas was not very good at that. He was not a very good coach in terms of in-game decision-making. I always go back to the game with Taijuan Walker against the San Francisco Giants. Guy was cruising right along against one of the best teams in baseball. I believe at the time they had the best record in baseball. He took him out, brought in Aaron Loop. I understand Loop had a great season, but the Giants had a big inning against him. Mets end up losing that game. That's just one of the many bad decisions Luis Rojas made. Buck Showalter's, on the other hand, sure, he's going to make mistakes, everyone will, but he's going to make true, smart, in-game decisions. And he's also not all about analytics, right? He's a kind of an old-school manager that is kind of, sure, he's going to use analytics and he'll use stats and stuff. Every coach does it. But he's also going to go on how the game's going, the pace of the game, the tempo, the magnitude of the game. If it's a big game in September that could ultimately decide your season, you might go to a higher-end reliever than a low-end reliever. You might go straight to your closer in the 8th inning than go into maybe a mid-reliever that has been, struggling recently or something like that. That's the type of decisions that Buck Showalter is going to bring to the table as the New York Mets. And the Mets haven't had that in many, many seasons. You can make the argument they haven't had that since Terry Collins. I would even make... Not really an argument. It's kind of facts. Buck Showalter's definitely probably the better option as manager than, Terry Collins or any of the recent ones with the Mets. But just, if you're a Met fan, because obviously I'm not, but if you're a Met fan today, not only should you feel much more confident, much more, kind of upbeat, and much more feel like the team's in good hands, you have a much better roster than you did last year and the roster that you had under the previous two managers, obviously being Callaway and Rojas. You brought in Max Scherzer. You already have Jacob deGrom. I'm still going to say it all off season. I'll still say it and into the season. You have Francisco Lindor, right? He had a really bad year last year, really struggled, was not able to get going. Was injured, then back on, injured. He just had a rough year. He had a down year. You still got to hope that Lindor, if he stays healthy and if he can play to his best ability, is still one of the best shortstops in the game. There's no arguing that. He is one of the better shortstops in the game. The stats show it. Right? So, that's that, right? The stats show he's one of the best. So, you have Lindor, you have deGrom, you have Scherzer. Right then and there, Scherzer, deGrom, those are your two guys that you're going to rely on. If them two have good seasons, the Mets will have a good season. I could make the argument that what Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer do will depend on the Mets season. If they stay healthy. If they pitch big in big spots. If they can fully be full strength and ready to go when the playoffs come around and if the Mets get into the playoffs. I will really say this, that the season really hinges on those two guys. You also brought in Starling Marte as an outfielder, center fielder, a guy who I think is one of the most underrated players in the MLB. He can do it on both ends of the field. Offense with his bat, defense with his glove. He's a guy that is a solid hitter in terms of getting on base, hitting in big moments. A guy who, I guess you could say, he hasn't really played in a big market, but a guy who knows what it's like to get up in big spots and knows what it's like to get hits in big spots. And ultimately, he's a guy that hits for average. He's a 310, 330 hitter. I believe that's what he was like last year. He's not a guy that's going to bat 250 and cranking a bunch of home runs. He's going to bat 330. He's going to bat, high twos, low threes, and he's got a good amount of power. You also brought in Mark Hanna, Add that to already a lineup that already has guys like Brandon Nimmo and already has guys like Pete Alonso. And that is what the Mets got. And now you bring in a much experienced manager in Buck Showalter. Now, here's my thing with Buck Showalter. Right? Experience, knows the games, been in big situations, been to the playoffs. He's experienced. Whatever you want to put under the category of experienced, he has it. Do you want to coach with playoff experience? Showalter's got it. Do you want to coach with experience of making decisions in big games? Showalter's got it. Do you want a coach that has experience of a head coach? This isn't like they got some guy that's been an assistant or a hitting coach. He's been a head coach before, right? That's what he's been doing for his whole career. Do you want a coach that I can make a million different things? Coached in big situations. Yes, Showalter has done it. So, you're getting that. I'm going to say this many times. The Mets have not had that in their past two managers. Two inexperienced guys that never were coaches, thrust into big situations, did not succeed. All I will tell you is this with Showalter. No matter, he could win 5, he could go under, he could be terrible for 3 years. All I can say is this with Showalter. You're getting a real manager who's going to make in-game decisions, and he's going to do it to help the team best. He's not always going to do it, this guy pitched yesterday, or, the analytics say this. He's going to do what's best in the moment and the situation for the team. He's not always going to say, this guy has a 400 average against this guy. He only has a, or a 150 average against this. This guy is good against this pitcher, bad against this pitcher. He's going to put in who ultimately he believes the pace of the game, the magnitude of the game, the inning, the amount of outs, the base runners, all that stuff he's going to bring into consideration. He's going to put the guys out there. He's going to make his lineups the same way. He's not all about analytics. He's about how guys are hitting at the moment, how guys are overall performing defensively and offensively. And ultimately, he's going to roll the best 9 guys out there that he believes is going to help them win the game. And win many games, as Mets fans hope. And he has been away from the game a little bit. And I at first, I didn't hear this from anybody. So don't go looking around for, comparisons to him and Tony La Russa. Tony La Russa, right? I wasn't a big fan of that hiring because Tony La Russa was out of the game for so long. Has been out of the game for a really long time. And he was in his prime long time ago. Came back now, really old school. He's already had some issues. He's just not a big fan. Showalter, he's been out of the game for a few years. It's not like he's been out of the game for a decade. I believe his last year with the Orioles was like 2015 or 2016, so it's only been like 4 or 5 years. I know that might sound like a long time, but in terms of how the game's evolved, it's really not that crazy. It's really not that much of it's really not that long time. That much of that long of a time. Now, the one thing concerns me a little bit about Showalter is how he ended in Baltimore, because it did end a little rough. The team started to struggle. It just wasn't the same team. It was almost just like, it was kind of like his time was up as a manager, and I guess maybe you could say, it was just because that was the Orioles, and it just was simple. The simplest way I could put it, his time was up with the Orioles. And you got to hope that doesn't transfer over to the Mets. That's what you got to hope. And you got to hope that, if you're a Met fan, you got to hope you found your guy. Because it's almost something like, like a lot of teams, like you've been going through this for the past couple of years. Now, you got to hope you found your guy. You've went through many trials. It's been bad. Bad. Like those other 2 coaches, those were experiments. This now you have a true coach, a true decision maker, a guy who truly knows the game and will coach it at the highest level. Is he going to really be able to get this team from where they're at now to that next level and beyond? And we'll see. That's still to be seen. This is, the Mets are in a situation like the Jets have been for many years. Jets Rex Ryan was great. He was awesome. Got us to 2 AFC Championship games, right? But after that, Bowles had the good first year, but then was terrible. And, don't even want to talk about Gaze. We all know how atrocious he was. And now you have Saleh. And he's been off to a little bit of a rough start, but, they are developing, they're progressing. You got to hope that it can get better. Same thing here with the Mets. Terry Collins got them to a World Series, all that stuff. Your past two managers have been failures. Now you bring in a guy that you really truly believe, shift the culture, change, and all that stuff. And another guy too, which Mets managers haven't done, he's going to hold guys accountable. So sum it up. You're getting a guy that the past two Mets managers didn't have those traits. You're now getting him in Buck Showalter. So you got to hope you like those traits, because that's what you're getting in Buck Showalter. An experienced, a veteran manager that's going to do whatever he can to help the team win. All right, so let's read this quick article here. So Buck Showalter agrees to 3-year contract as Mets manager replaces Luis Rojas. Buck Showalter has been given the task of turning the New York Mets around. Mets owner Steve Cohen announced the hire Saturday. Steve Cohen posted on his Twitter, "I'm pleased to announce Buck Showalter as the new manager of the New York Mets." John Heyman of the MLB Network reported Showalter signed a 3-year contract for a franchise looking for a quick turnaround. Showalter is one of the best people to hire as manager. The Mets will be the 5th different team Showalter has managed in his career. The Texas Rangers are the only organization that the 65-year-old didn't make the playoffs with from 2003 to 2006. 2003 to 2006. Showalter oversaw the development of the New York Yankees in the early 1990s before they became a dynasty under Joe Torre. He led the Arizona Diamondbacks to 100 wins and an NL West title in their second year of existence in 1999. Perhaps the most impressive feat of Showalter's career was leading the franchise resurgence for Baltimore Orioles. He helped them to 5 consecutive seasons, finishing at least 500, and made the playoffs 3 times in a 5-year period from 2012 to 2016. Prior to Showalter's hiring in 2010, the Orioles hadn't made the postseason since 1997. So, similar situation. Mets have been in a little bit of a postseason drought. Let's see if they can get back to the postseason. And Showalter's the guy, he's one of the main guys that can do that. You saw, with the Diamondbacks, second year of existence got them there. You saw with the Yankees was able to build them up a little bit. Then Torrey came in and the rest is history. Now you saw with the Orioles. With the Mets coming off a disappointing 77-85 record in 2021, manager Luis Rojas' option for next season was declined. Showalter became the 4th Mets manager since Terry Collins retired after the 2017 season. Mickey Callaway was in role for 2 years before being sacked at the end of 2019. Former Mets star Carlos Beltran was hired to replace Callaway in November 2019. 2 months later, Major League Baseball released a report about Houston's Astros cheating scandal from the 2017 season when Beltran was on the roster. Beltran was the only Astros player named in MLB's report. He resigned his position with the Mets on January 16, 2020, before managing a game with the team. Rojas was hired to replace the 9-time All-Star in the role. He ultimately finished 103, 119 in 2 seasons. Expectations for the Mets in 2020 were off the charts. 2021 were off the charts. They acquired Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco in an offseason trade from Cleveland to improve a core that already featured Pete Alonso, Jacob deGrom, Marcus Stroman, Michael Conforto, and Jeff McNeil. Lindor had a brutal start to the season with a .698 OPS in the first half. DeGrom was on track to have an historic season with a .56 ERA and 103 strikeouts in 64 innings over his first 10 starts, but a forearm injury kept him out of the season after July 7th. A little bit more here. Those were only 2 of the myriad problems that plagued the Mets en route to a 77-85 record. They missed the playoffs for the 6th straight year, and they have had just 1 winning season since 2017. Things even got so bad that at one point some players, including Lindor and Javier Baez, used a thumbs down gesture to mock Mets fans who booed them during a difficult stretch in August. It's to let fans know when we don't have success, we are going to get booed. So they are going to get booed when we have success. Baez, who was acquired in July from the Chicago Cubs, told reporters about the gesture. Baez now obviously signed a big deal with the Tigers. Lindor and Baez later apologized to Mets fans for their actions. This offseason has given Mets fans a new sense of hope, though. Max Scherzer, Starling Marte, Mark Canha, and Eduardo Escobar were all brought in as free agents. A new season will give the Mets a fresh start in their quest to compete for a playoff spot in the National League. Showalter will be tasked with leading the organization's turnaround on the field. There's a tremendous amount of talent already in place. So the Mets could be a sleeping giant in 2022. And, as I always say, to the Yankees, this is something that should be looked out at. Like the Yankees, Mets are doing stuff. They're making moves. Why don't the Yankees, once, if this lockout ever ends, step up to the plate and maybe do something? That would be probably pretty helpful. But yeah, in all seriousness, Yankees and all that stuff, aside, the Mets are finally seem like they're doing stuff in terms of doing it the right way. They seem to be following Steve Cohen's plan, and they kind of brought in a manager that's going to help the team win now. And that's kind of it. Buck Showalter is like a type of win now manager. Although he's very good at building teams, he's also a guy that's going to win pretty quickly. It's not going to take him 5 years to get it right. You saw it, the Diamondbacks got it right quickly, and the Orioles too is able to turn that thing around pretty quickly. I mean, you've seen the Orioles, since he left, it's been like 5 years, and they haven't turned that thing around. He was able to turn around in just a few years. So a guy who's going to be able to turn around pretty quickly. And when you hand him a roster like this, you just have to be optimistic. That it's just one of those things where he is going to be the right man for the job. And hey, he's an experienced manager. That's ultimately what the Mets needed, and that is ultimately what the Mets get. Alrighty. So, that's what I got for the New York Mets and their hiring of Buck Showalter. Coming up next here, we got Daniel Jones is done for the season. Yes, you have heard that right. The New York Giants quarterback. Has he played his last game in a New York Giants uniform? We'll get to that. We'll give you a little bit more up on the Giants and a lot of other stuff surrounding the brutal 4-10 New York Giants. Just adds to the collection of bad New York football as the Jets and the Giants are a combined 7-21 this season. We'll get to the Daniel Jones, and will he play another snap in a New York Giants uniform? We'll get to that coming up next. Alright, so welcome you back here up at the podcast. Alrighty, so some news in the world of football, though there's been a whole lot of it today. I'll first get to this. The New York Jets have officially announced, or a little bit ago, that Robert Saleh tested positive. So, I was going to talk about that today, given that that's a big development for the Jets and a big development for this weekend, obviously approaching their game against the Jaguars. Tight ends coach Ron Middleton is going to fill in for Saleh. Now, as of right now, Saleh's out, but technically Saleh can test back in and clear protocols before Sunday, so nothing's official quite yet, really. Nothing's official just yet. But as of right now, if the game were to be today, Ron Middleton would be the Jets head coach, and Saleh would not be at the game. So it stinks to see that. Just from a fan's perspective, I know we haven't. It's not like it's not like this is a huge game in terms of playoff implications, right? This game, this is just a good game to maybe build some confidence and develop a little bit and not get embarrassed by an awful team. But in terms of, you also want to see from a rookie coach, not only do you want to see development from players, but you want to see development from a coach. You want to see maybe, coaches get better time management, see, just how they ultimately can each week, can they get the guys fully ready and fully prepared. So that's going to be put on hold right now. And Ron Middleton will be the coach. So that's something I'll probably get into more detail tomorrow, probably tomorrow. It's not a guarantee just because of everything else going on in the sports world, and you also have Thursday Night Football and stuff like that, but I'm definitely thinking about talking about it, because I'll also get to it on Friday, too, when I give you my game picks and all that stuff. That will definitely be a topic of chatter. So we'll get to it, but that's something I want to say. Nick Sirianni as well tested positive, so a lot of stuff going on just around the world in sports, not even just in the NFL, NHL, NBA. There's been a lot of spikes in sports. You've seen it. It stinks to see because it was going so smoothly. Things were fans back in the stadiums and arenas and all that stuff, and things are going so smoothly, and it's almost like it's hitting a little bit of a bumpy road again, but they're finding a way to get through it. So either way, in all that news with everything COVID, because 90% of the news that has been put out over the past week and stuff like that, mainly this weekend, which was COVID was the reason we had the two Monday games and 2 Tuesdays games in all this news, and in all the news revolving around the Jets and Giants and New York football and all that stuff, and Saleh testing positive and all that stuff going on. Daniel Jones, it was officially announced that Daniel Jones is done for the season. And as I talked about earlier, before I get into any of it, before I get into any of the real logistics of it, you never like to see this happen to a player, right? My feelings on Daniel Jones. I've talked about it a ton. I've said it a lot. Since the day that the Giants drafted him, I didn't believe he was the guy for the Giants. I just didn't. I didn't think he was great in college. I didn't think he was that great of a player. I just didn't think he was quite NFL-ready quarterback and a guy that they should have drafted that early. Number one. Number two, I thought they should have drafted Josh Allen, the edge rusher out of Kentucky at the time. Now he's with Jacksonville as they drafted him. That's ultimately what I thought. The Giants obviously didn't do that. They went a different route. Whatever. It is what it is. But it is now official that he is out for the season. So Giants Daniel Jones reportedly shut down for rest of 2021 season with neck injury. So you got to hope that, just from a football fan, obviously I'm not a Giants fan, just from a football fan's perspective, you got to hope this is something that's not career-altering, or, you just got to hope that this is something that is just for this season, and after this season, he'll be all right. He'll be able to get back out there and play the sport again, because we've seen too often where guys have injuries to the head, neck area, anywhere on the body, head, upper body, lower body, wherever. They have injuries, and sometimes they can't bounce back. Right? So, and that's never good to see. So, you got to hope, especially in an area like a neck that's very sensitive, and your head and neck area is just never a good spot to get hit or have an injury, especially in a sport like football where they're going at each other at a max speed. You got to hope that this is something that, just from a football fan's perspective, is something that he will be able to recover from and be back ready for wherever he plays next year. And that's where I want to get to it right now. Right? Daniel Jones, now that he is done for the season, has he played his final snap with the New York Giants? That's the big question. That's the big question being asked today. That was the big question being asked yesterday. That was the big question being asked before the day after that. That's been the question really ever since he's been out with this neck injury. And the question right now is, the answer I have, just from what I've heard, what I've seen, what people believe, and ultimately, deep down inside, what I believe, I still don't know. And I know that might sound like a kind of a dumb answer, but it is kind of 50-50. Because I think a lot of what depends on Daniel Jones' future with the Giants is going to be whether or not they decide to retain Joe Judge, and whether or not they ultimately, whatever they do at the GM position. More than likely, Gettleman's gone for the after this season. That report came out a couple weeks ago. I think we all have a feeling that it was coming, just from an NFL perspective and a football perspective. It's kind of been one of those things. It's like, time's up. Time's up for Gettleman and the Giants. Time's up. He's done nothing right. That team has failed under him. They've been atrocious under him. A team that was supposed to be solid this year and compete has been everything but that. And I think we can all agree the GM's gone. And that does raise questions for Daniel Jones, because if the GM is gone, anytime, just this in general, anytime there's a change in leadership in an organization, in any sport, baseball, basketball, hockey, or football, right? When there's a change, there's going to be a change to the roster. There's going to be a change to a couple key positions. Right? A lot of guys want to bring in their own quarterbacks. They want to bring in their own players. They want to bring in guys that they ultimately believe are going to give them the best chance to win games. Coaches do it. GMs do it. Coordinators do it. collectively as a whole, they all chip in and they all do it. Previous administrations might like Daniel Jones, like Dave Gettleman and all them. They might like him, but if they do hire a new GM, they might not be a big fan. They might want to move on from Daniel Jones. It's a situation like Sam Darnold. Gaze, that was, Darnold and Gaze, them two were together, right? Gaze got fired. Darnold was kind of left on an island by himself. There was questions throughout the offseason. Is Darnold the guy in New York? What did the Jets do with Darnold? Well, we got our answer. Obviously, they went out and drafted Zach Wilson. Darnold's now with Carolina. We all know how that's all gone. So, we get all that. Same situation here with the Giants and Daniel Jones. Is they probably will fire Dave Gettleman. I can say that's pretty much all. They've done everything but fire him right now. Like they all know they're gonna fire him. I think he knows he's gone. I think Mara knows he's gone. I think the organization, Judge, all of them, I think they know he's gone. It's just a matter of once that final whistle sounds and the clock hits 000s in that Week 18 matchup, which I believe is home against Washington. I'm not too sure. I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to check that. Once the 000s hit in Week 18, we all know that Dave Gettleman would have GM'd his last season with the Giants. And that will raise questions in the offseason for Daniel Jones. That will also raise questions in the offseason for Joe Judge. That's another thing, too. If the Giants decide to move on from Gettleman, they bring in a new GM. Is that GM going to want to hire a new coach, or is he going to be okay with Judge? Are they going to bring in a guy that's close with Judge? Are they going to be a guy that kind of has the same mindset and kind of focus and, kind of what they believe the franchise, where that's headed as Judge? Or are they going to bring in a guy that's completely different and say, hey, you take control, you do what you want to do? And maybe that guy says, I want Judge out of here, Jones out of here, this guy out of here, this guy, trade this guy. We're tearing this thing down and we're restarting it and we're doing it my way. And that very well could happen. But all of that will depend on, all of that will just dictate whether or not Daniel Jones is with the Giants next season. And maybe he is. And maybe the Giants say, hey, we're going to draft the quarterback and we're going to bring in some competition. Maybe the Giants say, hey, we're done with Jones. We're going to bring in a kind of a stopgate veteran, guy that can just be with us for a season and wait until next year until the quarterback class is truly, truly trustable and really strong. Because this year's quarterback class is in an interesting situation. Very interesting. It's not anything special by any means. It's not anything like last year where you had Lawrence and Wilson and Fields and Jones and all those guys and Lance. It's not anything special. It's risky. It's a lot of unknowns. It's a lot of guys that have shown potential, but they haven't shown it in a very consistent way. And if they have shown it, it's been maybe only one big season, or maybe only a couple big games. Or maybe the talent they faced wasn't great. Which is why it might make for a little bit of a riskier pick this season. The quarterbacks this year, just in general, are risky picks. They're all risky. I heard reports that this might be the first year in a really long time where you don't get a quarterback going in the top 10. I don't know how true that is, like we all say. We got to figure out how the draft is and trades and the whole offseason goes. Because the offseason a lot of time dictates what happened in the draft. Because sometimes if you don't fill the needs in the free agency, you'll fill them in the draft, right? Or trades or all that good stuff. So a lot of this depends. If Daniel Jones is going to come back as the Giants, quarterback, a lot of it's going to depend on what they decide to do in the front office, what they decide to do with Gettleman, what they decide to do with Judge. If they decide to bring Judge back, if they decide to fire Gettleman, fire Judge, blow it all up, bring in a new guy, let him do what he wants to do with the quarterback and all the other positions in the organization as a whole, and figure that out. If I was the Giants, I would blow it all up. I'd tear it all down. I'd say, hey, this isn't working. I mean, here's my thing. What have you seen out of Joe Judge that truly makes you believe he's the right guy for the job? What have you seen out of him? If you're a Giant fan, what have you seen out of him? I'm sure you would probably say he's not the right guy. But just from, if you're a Giant fan and you watch all the games, you probably haven't seen much. You haven't seen that much. You haven't, right? So, and I just know from just hearing it and, seeing some of it, Joe Judge has not shown anything positive for the Giants. What did he do last year? Go 6-10? Great, they almost made the playoffs. I don't care about that. You went 6-10. You lost 10 games. Oh, we almost made the playoffs. The Eagles tanked. You lost 10 games. Any other division in football, you would have been dead last and eliminated 5 weeks earlier. This season, what has he shown you? 4-10? You finally got talent, and you're not utilizing it. The team stinks. The roster's just... You have talent. It's just like all over the place. Like you brought in Kenny Dollaty, and he's made pretty much no impact. Right? You pay him the big bucks, and he's done pretty much nothing. So, what have you seen from Judge? In 2 years now, he has gone 10-19 as you're 10-20 as coach. That's not good. And you're gonna sit here and tell me, if you're the Giants, that he's the guy for the job, and that Daniel Jones, a quarterback who just doesn't seem to really be getting much better, is gonna be your guy next season? A lot of questions raised. And now the Giants will start Jake Fromm for the rest of the year, which is what I believe they'll do. I think so. Which I don't know why they... Don't ask me. Don't ask me why. I'm a Jet fan, so I'm all immune to bad decision making and just stupid decisions. But why did you start Mike Glenn in the past couple weeks? The guy had been terrible, and you continue to start him. So I believe they're finally moving to Jake Fromm now. And who knows? Maybe Jake Fromm turns into Mike White, except more for a longer period of time. And maybe he shows you something. Maybe bring him to camp next year and see what he's all about. Who knows? But a lot of questions. A lot of questions with this Giants team. A lot of questions with the Giants around the coaching staff, GM. Here's my thing. Just from a football fan's perspective. And I'll get to this article about Daniel Jones and a little bit more in depth about him. If you're the Giants, right, you got to do this. At the end of the season, you got to just reevaluate it. You got to go through a couple things. What has Judge shown you? What has he shown you? Has he shown you development? Has he shown you this team getting better? If anything, this team's gotten worse from last year. The one thing I could say about the Giants last season was they were a team that was physical, and they were a team that were playing hard, and they were in games, and they were competitive. They weren't winning them, but they were in games, and they were competitive. This season, they're not really in games. They're not really competitive. Their offense stinks. The overall team's just terrible. I mean, you can make the argument for all three phases of the ball have decreased. You can make the argument Graham Gano hasn't been as great as last year. I don't know how true that is. I kind of just threw that out there. But you get what I'm saying. The defense has not been as great as it was last year, and the offense, I would even say, has gotten worse than last season. They had to fire Jason Garrett. Now you got Freddie Kitchens calling the plays, and that's been brutal as well. So it definitely makes for an interesting offseason. And even this now this injury with Jones makes it even more interesting because he lost a good amount of time in his development. I always say this. The third year for quarterbacks is big. If in year 1 and year 2 they were year 3 is huge. We saw it with Arnold. He was in year 1 and year 2. Year 3, he was not great. He was again. What did they do? They got rid of him. Right? Same thing here with Daniel Jones. He's been in year 1 and year 2. And now in year 3 he's also been and injured. Do you really bring him back? Because what if now you bring him back, it's a good season and 5th-year option, and then you get all that stuff going in there? If I were the Giants, I would clear house. Hey, you got to you clear house, blow it all up, get a stopgate quarterback, like a veteran that can come here and just be competitive, help you be competitive. Not saying next season completely blow it off, but next year, definitely create cap space and build towards the future. And then wait another year to see if the quarterbacks are better in the draft. That's ultimately what I do. What I would do. But maybe the Giants have other plans. Maybe they want to do something else. Maybe they say, we're putting all our chips in the middle. We're going with this plan. We're going with Judge. We're going with this roster. We're going all in. Maybe, because your cap space situation's bad too. So it's not like you could say, let's go out and sign this guy and this guy and this guy this offseason. Your cap space is bad. So that's another thing. It's not like you could say, we can maybe get out and get a big name player. Your cap space is really bad. So you're not going to have much movement unless if you make moves and get rid of guys. We'll see. So Giants Daniel Jones reportedly shut down for rest of 2021 season with neck injury. New York Giants quarterback Daniel Jones has been reportedly ruled out of the remainder of the season with a neck injury. ESPN's Jordan Raanan and Adam Schefter. Per ESPN's Jordan Raanan and Adam Schefter. The good news is Coach Joe Judge does not believe Jones will need surgery. Jones has been bothered by injuries throughout his young career. He appeared in 13 games during his 2019 rookie season and missed 2 games during the 2020 campaign with hamstring and ankle injuries. The 24-year-old has also suffered a concussion in Week 5 matchup against the Dallas Cowboys, though he was cleared to return for Week 6. He also missed several games with a neck ailment. Jones has been rather inconsistent this season, completing 64.3% of his passes for 2,428 yards and 10 touchdowns against 7 interceptions in 11 games. The Giants are 4-7 in games that he has started this season, which means they're 0-3 when other quarterbacks start, but that's a small sample size, and also you're throwing Mike Glennon out there. What do you expect? To win games? Not really. When Jones is sidelined, the Giants rely on backup Mike Glennon, who has completed 53.5% of his passes for 673 yards and 3 touchdowns against 7 interceptions this season. The Giants have struggled with Glennon under center, going 0-3 in his starts. I believe they're going to flip to Fromm now, and they're going to roll with him and see what he can do. That's going to be an interesting thing too. What does Fromm show you, right? You got 3 games left. Your season's done. I mean, what does Fromm show you? Let's see. Maybe Fromm shows you something positive that you could take into the offseason and say, hey, maybe we found our guy that we never knew we had, So it's as a fan, just going through it with the Jets, obviously being a Jet fan and going through it a lot, it's always very interesting this time of year. The possibilities and the coaches and what this team, what they might do. And Giants fans are probably going through the same thing. What I would say is this. Ultimately, I just from a common sense and logic standpoint, how can you keep Judge for another year? That's my whole thing. The Jets didn't even do that with Gaze. He went 7-9, 2-14. So he had 1 A year and 1 really bad year. And the Jets were like, did we bring him back? No, they got rid of him immediately, and rightfully so. The guy was awful, one of the worst coaches ever to coach. So now you sit here and say, okay, a 6-10 season, and he's on the brink of having another. He's on the brink of going 4-13. He's on the brink of going 5-12. Do you really bring him back? I wouldn't. I know I wouldn't. But it is the Giants. It's a team that hasn't gotten it right recently, has been struggling, just real bad. So we'll see what they do. And a lot of the decisions that they make with the front office and the coaching will ultimately dictate if Daniel Jones plays another game in a New York Giants uniform. And we'll see. It's going to be interesting. Alrighty, so that's what I got for Daniel Jones and him being done for the season. Coming up next, or kind of right now, I won't go to break for this one, but coming up next here, we'll get to the New York Sports Update. So we'll get this loaded up here, and then we'll get to all that good stuff. Kentucky is on tonight, so that's a positive for me. Tonight we've been so spoiled with all of the basketball or all the football going on the past 2 days. 4 games in 2 days. That's a rarity. It doesn't happen often. We've been so spoiled. Today was kind of like we were here and now we're like back down here. But you got Kentucky on, so that's good. We'll get to some of the NBA stuff here and NHL and all that good stuff. As for the NBA tonight, we got a good amount of games on tonight. So one game got postponed. Now it's the Bulls Raptors. But other than that, all games are good to go as of right now. We got the Celtics Cavs. I'll give Celtics to win. Hawks Magic. Give Hawks to win. Nuggets Thunder. I'll give Nuggets to win. Bucks Rockets. Give Bucks to win. And Kings Clippers. I'll give Clippers to win. As for college basketball, got a good amount of games tonight. We got Kentucky, Western Kentucky. I'll give Kentucky the win. It should be a fun matchup. Western Kentucky is a pretty solid team. They're a solid, hard-fought team, pretty solid team. And I'll try to video will probably be up after the tip, after the game starts. So that will that's just gonna how it be. So yeah, the tip, yeah, right now, yeah, video will probably be up after the game starts. So I won't be able to get up before that, but just know I do have Kentucky winning. Some of the other games tonight, we got Auburn, Murray State. I'll give Auburn the win. Texas Tech, Eastern Washington, Texas Tech, Texas. I'll give Texas. Georgetown, Providence isn't going to be played. Tennessee, Arizona. I'll give. That's a good game. I'll give Tennessee the win. They're home. I'll give Tennessee the win. LSU, Lipscomb, something like that. I'll give LSU the win. Houston, Texas State, give Houston the win. And Duke, Virginia Tech, give Duke the win. Alrighty, and as for the NHL, nothing going on in the NHL. Should have known that. I don't know why I went to that. But yeah, that's what's on for tonight, and we'll get to fantasy basketball. By the way, football, my PPR league, my non-PPR league, I am winning right now. Obviously, it's 2 weeks because of the playoffs, so I'm winning right now 95-57, and I got some moves going. So my moves are adding A.J. Brown and dropping DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins obviously done for the season other than late in the playoffs, which fantasy will be done by that. And then adding Eagles defense and dropping Cowboys defense are the two moves I got going. And in my PPR league, I lost. So I still continue the consolation bracket. And my one move I got going is adding Eagles defense, dropping Cardinals. So that's what I got there. And as for fantasy basketball, I'm currently winning 244-239. Tonight I got going Darius Garland, John Collins, Nikola Jokic, Shai Alexander, Buddy Hield, and Rashawn Holmes. I did activate John Morant, and I dropped Cole Anthony, and Holmes is questionable. So Holmes' remains listed as questionable for Wednesday's game against the Clippers, but the Kings are optimistic he'll be able to play. Jason Anderson of the Sacramento Bee reports. So solid news for me, guy who's been out past couple games. Definitely could use him back. So that will be pretty good. Yeah, I've always said this, right? I love fantasy. I play fantasy baseball. I couldn't do hockey this year. I tried to get a group together. It's hard to get hockey. Not as many people are into hockey as other sports. But I always usually run the leagues. My baseball league, I was invited. I didn't run that league. I was going to run a league last year, the COVID year, but then obviously all that happened. So I couldn't do it. This year, I obviously was able to do one, did well. I came in second place. But it's like I love fantasy, but the one issue is I'm much more successful in basketball, hockey, and baseball than I am in football. Fantasy football, I have yet to win. I've been playing fantasy football for the longest, and I have yet to win a fantasy football league. My best place has been third. That's been my best. So I get to the playoffs and I just don't win. Like I just don't. So other than that though, fantasy basketball I've won fantasy basketball. My first year of fantasy baseball I got in second. My first year in fantasy hockey I got in second. So all those places all better than football. It just goes to show you, even just from a sports standpoint, how much games matter more in football than they do in other sports. I forget, it's like an actual thing. Football, like one game in a football season is like the equivalent to so many games in a baseball season in terms of magnitude and what it could mean in your season. I always say that. That's why football is such a highly viewed sport. That's why it draws in such a high viewership game in and game out, week in and week out. Because if you lose 1 week, that could be your season. If you lose your first 3 games of the year, that could be your season right there. In baseball, if you start off your season 0-3, you still got 159 more games to go. That's why football is it's also just a great sport to watch. I mean, I love baseball too. I love baseball. I don't think baseball is a boring sport at all. People say it's boring, and everyone's got their opinions. I strongly disagree. I think if you know the sport of baseball and you truly know what you're watching, baseball is an awesome sport to watch. It is. And not as much action, but that's just how the sports are. I mean, baseball, it's just a sport that's not meant to be played fast. I mean, it's the only sport really out there that doesn't have a clock. Football's got a clock, basketball's got a clock, hockey's got a clock. All those sports got clocks. Baseball don't. That's just how the game's played. But yeah, even in fantasy terms, like you lose 1 week in fantasy football, that could be the difference in your season. Even just in terms of matchups and games and stuff. You bench a player one time in baseball, well, hey, he'll get back at it the next day. Football, you got to wait a whole nother week. All the injuries and stuff like that. But anyway, that's just my fantasy football rant, whatever you want to call it. Extra talking, whatever it is. Either way, that'll do it for the podcast here today. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. A lot going on tomorrow and into Friday, leading you up to Christmas. Yes, I'm going to do a pod tomorrow, and I will do a pod Christmas Eve. I'll make sure to get that out early and then, head into the weekend with all the holidays and all that good stuff. So, hopefully you all enjoyed it. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. As always, thanks for watching. And as always, I'll see you all back here tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed it. And thanks for watching.